What I'd like to do is get back to the USS Indianapolis and the greatest generation. The greatest generation, the people the men and women that served in our Second World War, they were manned and personed by 16, 17, and 18-year-olds. Many of them enlisted when they weren't even of age. And they are referred to, even to this day, as the greatest generation. A definition, the greatest generation is a term made popular by journalist Tom Brokaw to describe the generation who grew up in the United States during the deprivation of the Great Depression and then went on to fight in World War II, as well as those whose productivity within the war's home front made a decisive material contribution to the war effort, for which the generation is also termed the GI generation. Now, for some of you who may not know this, on July 30th, 1945, this cruiser was taken down by a Japanese torpedo. From the time it was hit on the front bow, the ship was underwater in 12 minutes. It is the single greatest loss at sea for the U.S. Navy. There were 1,200 crewmen, and 300 of them died instantly. 900 of them were stranded for 4 days in the water because nobody knew that they went down, because they were on a secretive mission taking Little Boy over for that bombing. Of the 900 that were stranded in the water, almost 600 of them died waiting to be rescued. Only 300 of the 1,200 actually survived. Now here's the situation, and maybe what I can do is kind of give you an idea of what was going on because of all of these people in the water. They were suffering from exposure. They were suffering, ironically, right, from dehydration. You can't drink salt water, it'll kill you. Saltwater poisoning, hypothermia. Many of the men thought that they saw islands on the horizon and started swimming off to these islands that were actually not there. The water, as you can see, was glassy and crystal clear, but at times there were 10-foot swells. Many of the men congregated on or around the nets, and there were very, very few, because of the way that the ship went down, very few rafts. They lived or subsisted on up to about 3 ounces of water per day. It goes without saying, right, with that ship going down so fast, so rapidly, so dramatically, that there was blood in the water. Those that were bleeding were grouped together. There were hundreds of sharks below and around. Many of the men continued to bump into the sharks, and they could feel the backs of the sharks on their feet. The sharks ate the dead bodies and the bloodied first. If you hear the story from former Lieutenant Colonel Oliver North, when you hear kind of something as challenging as this, you think, I don't have problems, right? This is a first world problem. These guys had problems. Former Lieutenant Colonel Oliver North said that the men of the U.S. Indianapolis were a supreme example of perseverance, of sacrifice, and faith. You get here, everybody believes in God. Patriotism at its highest times. Ordinary men in extraordinary times. As you can imagine, of the 300 men that lived, many of them could not even talk about it for years. For me and my age, that's like my grandpa's. You know, my grandpa age, for some of you different. Now here's the cool thing, right? So the rescue comes. Nobody knew that these guys were down, right? So they're in the water for 3 to 5 days, depending. Their angel, Chuck Wynn, flew by and saw men. These men, you guys, were scattered over 20 to 25 miles. They were everywhere. They were scattered. And then Adrian Marks landed his plane, even though Superior said, don't land that plane. Don't take it down. He took it down so that men could just grab on to the wings. Can you imagine waiting for your time to be the one that actually gets on the wing, or actually gets in the cockpit, or gets to the next boat? It took days to even get them there. As they were pulling some of the injured men onto the plane, because they had been in the water, because they had been injured, some of their flesh, when they just pulled their arm up, they were in such a compromised position. The very, very sad thing about it is that for whatever reason, many of them died after spotting that the rescuers were in sight. Just an amazing amount of perseverance, of courage. Here's another example, another picture of these. There was oil and blood everywhere. This is an example of a man getting rescued and getting cleaned off. This is the greatest generation. I mean, when you think back, sometimes you go, oh my gosh, they're 89 years old, they're 94, 95 years old, and they just seem old, right? But so relevant for all of us. You know, when I think about the greatest generation and the sacrifice that was made, like I said, I think about my own problems and I go, I don't have problems, right? Those guys had problems. But at the same time, like they did, we have choices to make too, yeah? In the conflict and the adversity that we face every day, do we succumb to exhaustion? Do we possibly lose hope because others around us have lost hope? Do sometimes we just kind of, hey, you know what? I'm just going to swallow some salt water and sink. It's just too much. I can't take this anymore. Do I give up treading water and just expire, drown? Do I fight amongst everybody else that's negative about it? Do I succumb to that? Do I lose my mind? Do I flip out and possibly swim to an island that's not there? Or just lose my will? You know, one of the things that I would say is that, and these are the men in and around that time, they are still so relevant today. Yeah? These are our grandpas. These guys have made the ultimate sacrifice. They fought, and you look at any one of these and you go, oh my gosh, were these guys bad? You know what? They were. So these guys are the ones of the 300. If you ever have time, you listen to these interviews over and over of many of these men. It's just so amazingly impressive. So really, I think the question for all of us is, we going to be a result of our circumstances, or we're going to rise up, you know? Are we going to rise up when maybe the sharks of life come up, just like pound them in the head, right? Just kind of pound them silly, or are you going to dance on their backs until the rescuers come? Are you going to persevere? You know, there was a great clip from the movie Jaws about this man. We couldn't figure out, you know, after talking with Ty and all that, go, is that Australian? Or is that British? Or is that Scottish? I couldn't tell. But if you ever have the opportunity, listen to the clip by Robert Shaw about the USS Indianapolis and their example. But what I'd like to do today is, in the movie, how many of you have seen Hacksaw Ridge? Hands? Come on! You see it? Come on. It's a good movie. It's another story about the great generation. Desmond Doss prayed, Lord, please help me get one more. Lord, please help me get one more. And then in the end, when you leave, and this is the end of the town hall, after you see this video, just know that he saved 75 of his comrades.